What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and here with a bunch of data mined Marvel Snap cards, courtesy of SnapFan with the new patch yesterday. We now get to take a look at February's Marvel Snap cards. We've already taken a look at the January Marvel Snap season in the previous video like this, so go back and check that out if you're curious of what is to come sooner rather than later. Most of those cards haven't changed since the previous data mine video that I did, though one in particular has changed. I'll talk about that at the end of the video, but we are going to focus here on the February cards, starting with Star-Lord, Master of the Sun, our February 2026 season pass. This is a 4/5 with, on reveal, next turn, you get +1 energy for each turn you've ended with unspent energy. I sort of look at this effect as a new take on Serra. I think most commonly you will play this card on turn 5, and because it only costs 4 energy, you will have unspent energy that turn, and hopefully unspent energy most or a lot of the turns leading up to that, and then you get all of that unspent energy back. And the reason that that's good is it allows you to toss priority and play a bunch of cards that your opponent is not expecting you to play and can't really predict how you'll play on the final turn. I think that that is the most straightforward interpretation of Star-Lord, Master of the Sun, but there are some additional synergies here. You can play it on turn 4. I don't think that that's as good because you'll use all of your energy most of the time to play it on turn 4, but you could do that, and then on turn 5 you'll have potentially 8 energy to do some funky stuff with, or you will you could still wind up playing Serra on turn 5. I think that that is still totally acceptable. One other thing that you could do on that turn 5 is Odin, the Star-Lord, and if you only play like a 1-cost card in addition to that, then you still have unspent energy that turn. You might be getting additional value out of Odin there. There's other ways to trigger Star-Lord multiple times for even better effects. It could just be a Grandmaster. You could actually spend turn 5 playing Odin and Grandmaster with your 8 energy from Star-Lord played on turn 4. And you could also play Star-Lord into Wong or Kamar Taj, so that way you are getting even more uses out of it. Now, those two examples, the Odin Grandmaster and Wong, will mean that then you are getting less efficiency from the on-reveal ability, because with Wong, you'll have to spend 4 energy to play the Wong, presumably on turn 4, and then turn 5 you're playing Star-Lord into Wong, which means you only have probably 4 turns with unspent energy. Of course, you could always throw in a magic at some point, turn 4 magic, turn 5 Wong, turn 6 Star-Lord, Master of the Sun, plus 12 energy onto turn 7. That seems a lot of fun, and there are a lot of ways that you can make use of all of that bonus energy. So I think there's a lot of applications for Star-Lord, both for abusing it with finding ways to get multiple uses of his on-reveal ability, but also just abusing it by not having to commit any points to the board until the final turn of the game. I think that both of those applications are going to be pretty reasonable, and also just like comparing this directly to Serra is like fair, but there's things that this can do that Serra cannot. If you just play this card on turn 5, generate 5 energy from it, on turn 6 you'll have 11 energy, which means you could do something similar that you can do from a Serra deck. With 11 energy, you can play 3 3-cost cards plus a 2-cost card. That's pretty good for your final turn output if there's like a bunch of Silver Surfer cards that you play. And I just think about that because I've played Serra in a bunch of different Silver Surfer decks. That's like the main synergy other than like ongoing decks, but ongoing decks would probably prioritize Serra still because Serra is an ongoing card. But with 11 energy, you don't just have to play a bunch of 2 and 3 cost cards, you also have open lines then to play a 5-cost card and a 6-cost card, for instance. And you could also just play Star-Lord on turn 4, generate 3 energy, and then you have 8 energy to play like Sarah, plus Mystique on turn 5, or like Sarah plus Grandmaster. I think there's a lot of ways that can set you up for big plays that go way over the top and really just leave your opponent guessing for what you're actually going to wind up doing. I think that the card is called Jim Hammond that gets +1 power for each bonus energy or each unspent. No. That's just for each bonus energy, right? Yeah, that's Jim Hammond. Sunspot is for your unspent energy. Sunspot as a good turn 2 play is going to be pretty reasonable. Obviously, whenever you're talking about unspent energy, high evolutionary stuff does at least want to enter the conversation. That also facilitates different limbo strategies. Magic is often played in those high evolutionary decks. I don't personally think that that is the first place that you want to go. I think that you'll probably want to look towards some of the other things that I've already talked about, but a little more support for high evolutionary decks can certainly be reasonable. As far as I understand, ending your turn with unspent energy usually just means not spending all of your energy, and I know that that sounds very straightforward. I bring it up because there are weird synergies that you can pull off with like different I bring up, so Legion. When you Legion a Project Pegasus or a Tinker's Workshop, you get that energy at the end of the turn, and Sunspot actually gets that extra energy, and then you can use that energy in the following turn. It's a very weird and niche example, but maybe it means that something like Jennifer Kale or Psylocke could have some interesting implications with how it interacts with Star-Lord. Maybe you are allowed to play a turn 2 Psylocke, and that counts as having a turn with unspent energy. You go like turn 2 Psylocke, turn 1 nothing, turn 2 Psylocke, turn 3 Star-Lord, get +2 energy going into the next turn. No, that doesn't really make any sense, but it might work like that. So I just want to bring that up as a possibility. I do think there's a lot of possibilities though with Star-Lord, so I don't think you'll be hurting for synergies, and it seems like a pretty cool card. Next up we have Magis, which is going to be the super premium season pass card, a 3/5 activate that says copy the text of a character in your deck with cost equal to your unspent energy. And this card I think is very, very, very good. I talked about a lot of different potential ways to use Magis. I do believe that when you are copying the text of a character in your deck, it will repeat any on-reveal abilities. If it doesn't work like that, this card seems very limited in its scope, but I do believe because of that, it will be able to copy on-reveal abilities of cards in your deck. And for that, I'll give you a second. Again, I did this in the last video to take a moment to think about what the potential applications of this could be for you, just so that way you have some time to think about it. But I think that where this can shine is as it's like a tutor effect, right? And there's a few ways to utilize a tutor effect. The primary way, I believe, is you will play exactly 1 card of a specific cost. So that way, when you end your turn with that amount of unspent energy, you can be guaranteed that Magis is always going to hit that. For example, you end turn 4 with 4 unspent energy, you activate Magis, it immediately grabs Star-Lord. Is that something good? Well, I think it's reasonable. I think that there's other good options for this, like Sarah is also fine, but so could Iron Man be. You go and grab a 5-power Iron Man, and that seems like a pretty reasonable use of this, but I still think we're thinking pretty small here. This can be used to grab Hela. If Hela is the only 6-cost card in your deck, this gives you a lot of consistency for some of those build-around strategies. And I think the best of those strategy options is going to be Mr. Negative. I think playing Magus on turn 3 and then skipping on turn 4 so that way you always hit your Mr. Negative, and Mr. Negative is the only 4-cost card in your deck is a really, really powerful opportunity. There's certainly other abilities that you could use to copy with Magus. One other thing that I saw being discussed that I think is pretty cool is turn 3 Magus into turn 4 Beta Ray Bill, and then activate Magus. And since you will have 0 unspent energy, Magus will always then go and grab Stormbreaker. And then you could activate, because cards care about the order that you activate them in, you could then activate King Eitri and still draw your Stormbreaker. Then you play Stormbreaker in the same location Magus is, and then you can Odin that location, and all of a sudden you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 doubles on your Beta Ray Bill. That might be a little bit overkill, come to think of it, but it seems like a pretty cool interaction that you can certainly try building around. I think that Magus is a really, really cool card to build around. And I think that there's other implications that I haven't even fully thought about all of the opportunities for. You could potentially play multiple cards of the same cost in your deck, and then once you draw one of them, then you will know that Magus is always going to be able to hit the other one. And there's other pretty powerful build-around cards. I think that Morgan Le Fay was a pretty good build-around card still at 4 energy, but now at 3 energy, she's so much easier to play, and now you could do something where, like, turn 5, you spend 2 of your energy on something, like destroying some stuff, and then you activate Magus to immediately activate Morgan Le Fay's ability. And on Morgan Le Fay specifically, there are cards that benefit from having multiple copies of themselves. Doubling is one thing, of course, and that could even go so far as like Odin, doubling up on an Odin effect, whatever that may be, could be pretty good. Because then you've got multiple Odins in a location. Jocasta is a card that works really well when you've got multiple versions of it. I will mention that if you were to activate Magus with a Jocasta, it will then no longer have its own ability. So once you're copying the text of something, it overwrites the existing text on Magus. For instance, if you skip and have 4 unspent energy, and then your Magus becomes an Absorbing Man, and then that Absorbing Man re-triggers and copies, like, I don't know, I'm trying to just make a convoluted example here, but then your Magus will then have the text of whatever your most recently played card was, if it was an on reveal card. But there's other weird things that you can do with that too, where you like just put it, don't worry about it. Okay, Magus can do some funky stuff. That's all that I wanted to say, and wanted to just briefly explain some copying, but I do think this is a really cool card. I really like toolbox effects, and you are paying a premium for what you're doing with Magus. That is the big thing to keep in mind. You will pay 3 energy to put this 3/5 into play, and then you will basically spend the full energy cost for whatever you are tutoring for. But in the case of like a Mr. Negative, you're making all of that energy back tenfold. And then you can even use Jane Foster to draw your Mr. Negative, and you just have a free 4 power card that you can play on the final turn of the game alongside all of your other Mr. Negative shenanigans. And I do believe that that is going to be the best home for this card. Also, it works well in games where, like, say you play this on turn 3 and then turn 4 you draw Mr. Negative. Okay, so then just play Mr. Negative, that's totally fine. Turn 5, maybe you play Jane Foster. Turn 6, you play all of your free cards, and then you activate Magus again, and Magis tutors up like a 6-cost card that, you know what, that might not work. That specifically might not work because I don't know if it's looking at the current cost or if it is looking at the printed cost of the card. The cost right here, the word cost is capitalized, which possibly means that it is looking at the printed cost of the card. It is, I could have just done this. So this being capitalized does imply that it is looking at whatever this number is supposed to be when the game starts, but they've been messing around with the templating a lot recently, to be honest. I think that cost should imply the card's current cost. So it might not actually work with a bunch of flipped cards from Mr. Negative, but I still think it is pretty cool. Oh, that was the last thing that I wanted to say. If there are decks where you have, now, I can't imagine you're going to put this into a deck with like these cards specifically, but I'm imagining a deck that has like Goliath and maybe that's a bad example because I can't think of another 2-cost ongoing that you'd necessarily want to copy. But the idea being that, like, because I know like Sam Wilson is oftentimes in that deck, but I'm just thinking of like, if there's a deck where you have like a few cards that you might want to copy, or even like a more convoluted combo than specifically Mr. Negative, where like you're just tutoring for one thing. But like, okay, here's a great example. Actually, I've already cracked it. Well, no, that doesn't quite work still. I was thinking, okay, if this does work and looks at the printed cost of the card that it is trying to copy, then you could play turn 4 Mr. Negative, turn 5 do nothing and activate Magis. It would copy Jane Foster and then draw all of your 0-cost flipped cards. I don't believe that that's how it works though, but I did just want to bring that up as an option. I covered Moondragon in my last video as well, and I think that some people were getting excited about this card. I don't think you should be. The main reason people are getting excited about this card is it has a similar text to Doom 2099. End of turn, if you played one card this turn, do something. I don't think that +2 power is nearly as powerful as what Doom 2099 is trying to do for you, but also spend all of your energy, I don't think is something that a Doom 2099 deck is trying to do typically, mostly because a Doom 2099 deck, when they are the best, is when they are playing Doom 2099 on turn 3, and that can only happen with Psylocke and potentially Zabu for sure, which is now a 1-cost card, and you could go Zabu into Moondragon into Doom 2099. But if you are a Zabu deck, you're trying to reduce the cost of all of your 4-cost cards in your deck. So that would then mean on turn 4, you are very unlikely to be able to play one card and have it spend all of your energy. So I think that this is just asking too much. If you go Psylocke into Doom 2099 on turn 3, then you're playing this on turn 4, which is just not worth it at that point because it's not pumping itself up that turn. So it can only pump itself up 2 more times. And then even if it does get pumped up in those remaining 2 turns, you've played basically essentially a 4/6 with no abilities, which isn't that great. Now, the upside of this is the fact that it has the same trigger condition does mean that maybe you are trying to multiply this trigger condition with something like Invisible Woman First Steps. But then when are you playing Invisible Woman First Steps? Are you playing that on turn 3, the turn that you need to play Doom 2099? Because that's terrible. And ultimately, I just don't think that this card is doing what it needs to do in the decks that it wants to do. Other Invisible Woman decks are not trying to spend all of their energy playing one card each turn. Those are Sunspot decks and Thena decks. And because of that, and Jocasta decks, and because of all of that, I don't think that Moondragon is quite it. Now, this is a new card, Drax Avatar of Life, and I have not even read this card yet, so I'm going to take this in right now live. Drax Avatar of Life is a 4/4 with end of turn, +4 power. if your opponent played a card with greater power this turn. So I assume greater than Drax. So it's like an Ezekiel. Oh, I don't love that. Move to that card if you'd be winning its location. Huh. Okay. Well, here's the thing. This actually is not that bad. The trigger condition is very strange. However, on the final turn of the game, your opponent will probably play something with more than 4 power. And so this is a 4/8 Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel? Miss Marvel? Yeah, Captain Marvel. Yes, Captain Marvel. Sorry, there's a Miss Marvel, a Captain Carter, and a Captain Marvel, which is the card that I'm meaning to be talking about. So, if you just play this on the final turn of the game, and your opponent played a card on the final turn of the game with 5 or more power, this moves, and then it moves to the location if it's winning. Move to that card if you'd be winning its location. It's pretty specific. But it also doesn't have to move to get the +4 power. And, you could also simply play it early, and then it's like a really weird threat that your opponent has to play around. I mean, it's basically a 4/8. And a 4/8 is not bad. A 4/8 is not crazy. But an 8 power Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, that has a little bit of other weird restrictions, because it's not quite Captain Marvel. I think that this is fine. I think that when you are playing fair Marvel Snap, Captain Marvel is totally all right. The problem is, how often are you actually playing fair Marvel Snap? If you can get multiple activations out of this as well, then it's like an interesting dilemma, because it becomes better if you play it earlier. It could potentially be a 4/12 or a 4/16 if you play it on turn 4, and then it gets a buff on turns 5 and 6 in addition to turn 4, which I don't think is a crazy ask. Then it's a 4/16. However, the third trigger of this, the idea that your opponent is going to play a card with greater than 12 power, that seems like a stretch, because they have to be playing a card with greater than 12 power, knowing that that is going to move Drax, which is basically like spending all of their energy. So I think this is more likely to be a 4/12. But I guess the pressure that it puts on your opponent in those instances where it is potentially a 4/16 is interesting. But the other point that I wanted to bring out is that if this is already on the board, then the risk that you take is that, okay, it's a 4/8, I got it out early, but now it might not be moving. Now it might not be doing that Marvel thing at the end of the game. And it basically is at the end of the game. It's not quite end of the game, but it's end of turn and on the final turn. But if it's not on the final turn, then it's not an end of game trigger. And I think that that is an important bit of it. I don't think that this is anything particularly crazy. By the way, if you can hear Lily snoring, apologies, / you're welcome. I think that this card is like fine, but there's definitely some fun tension with it. So it's cool. This is another new one, and this is a 3/4 card coming to Series 4, I believe, that says add 2 members of the Guardians crew to your hand. And it's a 3/4, so it's not a skill. Interesting. So I guess the outstanding question with this is, this has gotta be an Agent Coulson. There is no way that this tutors up 2 Guardians from your deck, because then you would always just play Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord, and you would always get Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord. The fact that you're not always going to get Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord, though, feels much worse. I don't think that this is it yet. They keep trying to make Guardians work. I think they gotta keep trying. I can't remember if this one is new. Kraglin is a 3/2, which says, on reveal, banish the top card of your deck. If it was 4 cost or higher, +2 energy next turn. Otherwise, give this +4 power. So this is a ramp card, and you are trying to play a bunch of expensive cards in your deck, so that way you can go turn 3 Kraglin, turn 4 play a 6 cost card. And I think it's fairly straightforward in its applications. If you miss, feels terrible. So you really don't want to be missing. You don't want to be playing a 3/6. You actively want to be playing a 3/2 that ramps you and allows you to then have the curve of 6, 5, 6. So 3, 6, 5, 6. And you can just build your deck in that way and feel pretty reasonable about it. There is kind of a tricky dilemma because ramp is pretty big right now. There's a lot of people ramping into some big cards, and if you Luna Snow out a big card, or if you wave out a big card, the idea is in some matchups that's going to be an asymmetrical effect because you are playing a more powerful card than your opponent. There's some decks you can play against where you wave them and they don't get to take advantage of wave at all. Think about playing wave against a Silver Surfer deck. You play it, they play a 3 cost card the next turn, and you're like, sure, that was fine. Maybe they play a Sarah. That's a little bit awkward for you. But most of the time, they will just wind up playing a 3 cost card or maybe a 4 cost card that they were going to play anyways. But that's how they built their deck without any top end cards. And Luna Snow. So right. Sometimes a wave can be non-symmetrical, asymmetrical. Sure. But Wave and Luna Snow also do this awkward thing when your opponent is playing ramp. They give your opponent the ramp for them. And so in these matchups, playing the card winds up being, it's like fine because you're both looking to ramp anyways, but you will actually, it's kind of similar to Magic. Like the person that spends their turn playing Magic is much worse off than the other player. Like if you're playing against a ramp deck, and you're playing a ramp deck, on turn 3, you want to play like your Lockjaw or something, or your Chamber, and hope that your opponent just ramps for you. What Kraglin does is say, no, I am ramping only for me. And it's one of a few cards in the game that actually does that, which can be a pretty big payoff. It's a lot less consistent. You are trading that consistency for the asymmetry of the fact that Kraglin is always only going to ramp you. Sometimes it won't even ramp you though, and that is a little bit of a cost that you have to deal with. Here's the tricky thing with Kraglin specifically. If you've decided that you want to play a ramp deck and you like the consistency aspect of the deck, you might decide you are also playing Wave, Electro, and Luna Snow. Electro, I didn't mention, it's not symmetrical, but there's a different drawback for it. But you build your deck around mitigating that drawback, right? So say you want to play all of those cards, and say you also decide to play Kraglin as like the 4th copy of that ramp, which feels overkill, but roll with me here. Turn 3 rolls around. You don't have Wave, you don't have Luna Snow, you don't have Electro, so you decide you're playing Kraglin to ramp you at this point. Well, if you don't have any of those other 3 cards, that means those other 3 cards are in your deck, which then means you are 50-50 to miss with Kraglin. And that's a little bit sketchy. unfortunately. So I think that Kraglin suffers because of the instances where you would play him, because he is the 4th best ramp card or 5th best ramp card potentially, if you want to throw in like Superior Spider-Man, which has other build around requirements that probably take it out of consideration for those specific decks. But still, if he's the 4th best ramp card in those specific decks, then things do get a little bit awkward. Maybe there's some, no, you don't really want to play this with Wong. Yeah, what are you looking to do with Kraglin? I'm not sure. I think this one is, again, probably not there yet. Next up, we've got Jack Flag, and I flagged a few ways that this card didn't seem great in my previous video. One commenter did bring up potentially using this as a card in Silver Surfer, and I don't think it's terrible there. I don't think that it is as good still as a few of the other cards that are used in the Surfer archetype, mainly now Maverick, but also Captain Carter and Brood. Of course, that's going to be like the trio for a little bit of Silver Surfer cards that are good to pump up. If you are pumping up other things in the location, it's giving them an additional 2 power. It caps at that point, but it also gets to pump up itself if Silver Surfer pumps it up. So if it's pumping up one thing, it's a 3/7. But if you compare that to Sebastian Shaw, that's still smaller. It's a 3/8. If it's pumping up 2 things, then it's effectively a 3/9, at which point it's better than Sebastian Shaw. But if you have multiple ways to pump things up in the deck, or like it's not necessarily going to take another buff as good as Sebastian Shaw, depending on, you know, what locations or other pump cards you were playing. I've seen like some, what are they called? Not only Herbie, but Amazing Andy to like throw some pump around in Jocasta Silver Surfer decks recently. I don't think that this is as bad as I initially thought. I do think that the competition is super tight in a lot of the decks that he looks to be good in. And the other thing that I compared him to was speed. And if he is pumping up himself plus 4 other things, or 3 other things at the location, then it is a 3/11, right? If it's only pumping up 2 other things at the location, then it's a 3/9, which is the same stats as speed. And when you pump up speed, speed also gets to 3/11. So it seems like it's just asking for more from you than speed. I also think that speed's like kind of a busted card. Just the numbers on it wind up being strong enough that like it prices Captain America out of ongoing decks, which always feels terrible. But this, like, yeah, you put this in a Captain America location and it's still going to get about the same amount of points as speed would get on any given situation. And speed rewards you for what you're already trying to do. This also rewards you for what you're already trying to do, which is pump up your cards. And in ongoing strategies, there's additional ways to pump up your cards. So there are some synergies there, because like you could play it alongside Captain, you could play it alongside speed, and all of these things are reasonable. I just don't know if it's going to make the cut. On the topic, though, of comments, if you comment on any of my videos, you are entered into a giveaway to win season passes and PAX bundles. The only thing that I ask is, in your comment, please include the word SNAP. That way, when I do a search, I can find your comment and separates you from people that comment on my other videos about other games and things. You can enter once per video that I upload every season. So if I upload, 20, I typically upload almost daily. So that gives you nearly 30 potential entries. Just comment Marvel Snap on any of my videos for a chance to win. This is another new one here, and I believe another Series 4 card. This is a 2/2 with, on reveal, on odd turns, give your cards at the left location +1 power. On even turns, give to the right location. This is cool to have a sort of modal effect like this. It looks like it can pump itself, so if you're playing this on an odd turn, you'll probably want to play it to the left, and on an even turn, you'll want to play it to the right. Think the most obvious implication of this is playing this on turn 6. That way you have a full location and you can give 4 cards the buff. And like a 2/6, totally reasonable. A 2/5, also pretty reasonable, especially if you are playing it with other cards that appreciate a buff more than other effects. It's not a crazy buff, so yeah, it's nothing super wild, but I could definitely see playing this plus Maverick on turn 5, and then you're multiplying that buff to something that you'll play on turn 6, and potentially you're also pumping up like a Sebastian Shaw. I think that this actually has a much easier time getting included in a Silver Surfer deck because it is asking something a little bit different from you, and that is that it only costs 2 energy. Now, at the same time, in a Silver Surfer deck, it's a little bit awkward because you're never going to want to play this on turn 6, and you're basically only going to ever want to play this on turn 5. One other thing I just thought about, you could just play this on turn 2 and then turn 3 play Superior Spider-Man. This is another card in that it can pump itself, sets up well into a Superior Spider-Man to allow you to ramp into 5 energy on turn 4, so that could be another home for it. What are some other things you could potentially do with Starhawk? Well, if you can get multiple uses out of its ability, that's interesting, and you could do something where you play it on turn 5 into the left location, and then on turn 6 you Grandmaster and pump up your cards at the right location. Yeah, seems fair, seems fine, nothing crazy. I think that this card isn't going to be a huge shaker-upper, but 4 pumps is cool. One other card that appreciates a pump is Clea, and just being able to get like a cheap pump on her once she's already on the board is pretty cool as well, I think. So yeah, Starhawk seems fun and fine, and I'm going to round out this video by taking another look at Shou-Lao the Undying, our January Season Pass card. And this card has changed a little bit since my last video, which is why I wanted to touch on it specifically. It was a 5/10 that gave +2 power for each turn you played 2 or more cards. Now it is a 5/8, which gives +3 power for each turn you played 2 or more cards. That just seems like a buff on a card that I already thought was pretty ridiculous. So yeah, this seems absolutely crazy. It does not seem unreasonable to play like a +15 power bonus out of it fairly like easily across the board, and if not still a +12. In the instances where it's giving +12, it is the exact same amount of points as it was previously. More points tied up in Shadow Kingable power is arguably a better thing, and by that I mean a worse thing for Shou-Lao and a better thing for the health of the game. So yeah, I think that could be argued as like potentially a nerf, but if you play 5 turns where you play 2 or more cards, then you are getting into a situation where, I mean, it's only +1 point over what it previously was, right? Because it would have been a total of, 20, and now it's a total of 23. Whereas you have 4 turns. Oh no, it's a buff for 4 turns too. I'm sorry. Yeah, wait, no, this is all, and that makes sense because all that you need to do in order to make it the exact same is play 2 or more cards on 2 different turns, right? Because it only lost 2 points and it gained 1 point for its on reveal trigger ability. So yeah, this thing already seemed really, really good, and now it seems even better. That's basically all I have to say about it. I'll be talking more about Shou-Lao and the other cards from Shou-Lao's season in my season review video for January, sometime towards the end of the year. But for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.